a couple trainings in Staten Island. We did trainings in at the OMH office. But in case you don't know me, my name is Rusty Foster. I am one of the people that do trainings for the Tobacco Cessation Training and Technical Assistance Center, also endearingly known as TIC-TAC. And today we're going to try to walk through the possibility or the necessity, let's put it that way, of modifying motivational interviewing when working with people with serious mental illness. Okay.
Okay.
And we're going to be interactive. We have some, we'll talk about things that you might consider doing, and then we'll actually try them out through the chat box and short answer polls. So, and by the way, we have Noah Lipton has joined the call. He's from TIC-TAC. Jill Williams has joined the call, and she's our main expert on tobacco dependency treatment, and she's from she's a professor at Rutgers University Medical Center, and she is the chair of the Department of Substance Use. Do I have that right, Jill?
Close enough.
I got your name right. And also Nancy Koval is participating in this. So we got a good group. We have a couple more people join us. We have Sylvia Bernard. We have Wen. And if you guys would just type the agency and program that in the chat box, agency and program that you're from, that'd be great. So we got a sense of who's on the call. Okay, so this is the disclosure. I have, I don't have any financial arrangements at all with any of these things that we're going to present. These are the learning objectives. I'm not going to read them. Well, let's do it this way. So that's the first one. You guys can read them a little bit. There's number 2 and there's number 3. I'll give you a second to look at them. Okay, and then here's the agenda. We're going to talk about challenges in using motivational interviewing with people with serious mental illness. And then we're going to talk about some strategies for some particular challenges, and these are the 3 areas that we're going to try to cover. And we're going to talk about when not to use motivational interviewing. So that's the agenda. That's what we're going to do today. And this is, I put this as, usually, you have your references at the end. I'm putting this at the beginning because this is the main article that I've referenced around modifying motivational interviewing. And they did it for dually diagnosed patients, but there are people with a serious mental illness and also drug and alcohol. And so I just wanted to give them due credit for the work that you're going to see. All right, so here we go. So why modify motivational interviewing? Well, motivational interviewing is a particular style of having a conversation with people, and it uses some verbal persuasion, it uses logical reasoning. People have to do some self-examining and informed decision-making. So it's really, you ask open questions, you do reflections, people respond. They can use a decisional balance. So they use all of these kind of higher-end executive processes in working within a motivational interviewing framework. And so consumers with serious mental illness can have difficulty with this process because they have a number of different things that create challenges, difficulty attending to the content, remaining consistently based in reality, having enough motivational energy to engage in the conversation. So because of those types of issues that they're going to be involved in when you're talking with them using a motivational interviewing approach, you might have to change some of the basic skills and some of the tools that you learn when you're first learning motivational interviewing. So, this is a little bit more of that. It can be difficult for consumers with serious mental illness to be able to self-reflect, cognitively track what you're saying when you're talking to them, praising the consequences of their own behaviors, and holding it in balance. It's that pros and cons and the ambivalence. They could have difficulty holding in balance competing motivations for changing or not changing. So that's kind of the overall difficulties that consumers can have with a motivational interviewing approach. Doesn't mean motivational interviewing can't be used with people with serious mental illness. It's just that you have to be aware of these challenges and make some slight modifications to what you're going to do. So can we put this short answer poll up? So we have a number of people on. I'm assuming everybody works with people that do have serious mental health problems and some pose some challenges. So what things? And this is a short answer poll. We don't see your name. You just type in here. You can only type in one thing because if you type in a second, you can only type in one thing because if you type in a second thing, the first thing disappears. So type in one thing. And it says, what difficulties have you experienced when using MI with people with serious mental illness? And you can't be wrong in this. You're just putting in, it might not even be your experience. It might be what you predict will make it hard to use what you learned about motivational interviewing. We do hear people typing. Aha! Oh, you guys are great. All right, we're going to put these up. We got two very interesting ones. When people still experience symptoms, meaning they have a short attention span. So people, they have trouble concentrating, so they're not going to stay in the conversation very long, right? So they have a short attention span, so that's one issue. Wow, these are great. Sometimes people with I'm assuming mental illness, have a difficult time focusing and staying on topic, and that's a little bit around the short attention span. There's often a little logical reasoning, which makes it difficult, and GAD clients seem to remain present in the incident. So they have trouble thinking about anything else. Is that right? That's how you see it? They're perseverating around the incident. So how do you move them forward? Okay, these are great. Okay, we're going to take these down, and you're going to see that these fit in with what we're going to go over. Okay, so the three clinical challenges, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what this means, is that people with serious mental illness can have cognitive impairments. They're going to have hallucinations, delusions, disorganized speech, and they can have restricted speech, diminished motivation to change. Now, sometimes these are called, the second and third bullet, sometimes they're called positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Those seem odd. I know those are kinds of what used in the literature, but those seem like odd kinds of statements. So we wanted to use the actual symptoms that could make it very difficult for you and for me to use motivational interviewing. So let's start with cognitive impairments. And the challenge is they complicated reflective listening process because, and this is what people say, they have trouble with their attention. They have a short attention spans. They can't attend for a long time. They have poor concentrations. They have kind of poor working memory, and their logical reasoning could be they don't really follow a lot logical reasoning. It's hard for them to do that. And so they have difficulty tracking or organizing responses to complex questions that you're going to ask. And, we're talking about complex open-ended questions, complex reflections, and they have disorganized speech and information processing deficits. So there's a lot of impairments that people can bring that are part of having the serious mental illness that can make it really complicated to use the basic skills, the open-ended questions, the reflections, summaries, using the decisional balance, etc. So we're going to begin looking at, with all of that, knowing all that, how can we take that into consideration? How can we accommodate this type of cognitive challenge? And so the one thing that you need to consider is to always simplify your open-ended questions and your reflections. So avoid compound, complicated open-ended questions. Where you ask, in your open-ended questions, you're actually asking three questions, like, tell me what happened in the hospital, what got you into the hospital, other issues that are in your life. So they have to figure out all three. You don't want to do that. You want to simplify your open questions. You want to inquire about small chunks of information in a straightforward manner, not with a lot of jargon. And tell me how your drinking has impacted on your mental health systems. So really kind of, and even smaller chunks of information than that, because you don't want to have a complicated interaction. You want to have a simplified interaction where they could understand and follow what you're saying. The open-ended questions should be clear, simple, and concise. So we're going to try these out. You're going to see how this works. And then you're going to use a repetition of reflections to help the conversation stay logically oriented, which means you're going to do a lot of reflections. So you're going to ask an open question, they say something, you're going to reflect, you're going to reflect, you're going to reflect in a way that keeps the conversation structured, and it's the repetition that keeps people understanding and where the conversation's going. And finally, going to use a liberal use of these successive and clearly stated reflections and summaries to compensate for memory, attention, and cognitive organization. So let's see what this one looks like. I was worrying about money, then the voice got so bad I couldn't take it anymore. Smoking was the only thing that calmed me down. So that's kind of a little bit of a complicated statement, right? There's like several statements here. Now, write in the chat box what you would consider a simple, concise reflection. That's what we want. That's what we're shooting for. And this is just practice. You can't go wrong. You can't make a mistake. So write in the chat box what you would consider a simple, concise reflection of what this individual said. Okay, we have Alyssa typing. And when? We got a lot of people typing. So you're saying that smoking calms you down. Perfect, simple, straightforward, concise. We'll give people a minute. Smoking was the only thing that calmed you down. Very good. That's perfect. I hear you say that when you are worried, smoking calms you down. Okay, that's a little more information than the first two, but it also is simple and straightforward. When you are worried, smoking calms you down. Now, do people mind if I get feedback a little bit? Lydia, are you okay with that? It's not a big thing. It's just something I wanted to say. Go for it. This is go for it. Go for it. Okay. So if you dropped off, I hear you say that, and you just say that you, because that's a lot of, it's not complicated, but it's a lot of stuff that's really not necessarily in the sentence. So you could just reflect, when you are worried, smoking calms you down, right? So sometimes we use things like it sounds like, you feel, and sometimes it's okay to just not say those. So you were saying, Sylvia said, so you were saying that smoking calms you down when the voices are bad. Okay. All right. That seems simple, right? That's a simple, straightforward reflection. Thank you for your feedback. Oh, that was from Lydia. Okay. And Sylvia, it could be the same with you. You say, smoking calms you down when the voices are bad, right? So that's a very direct, simple statement. All right. You guys are great. This is, you guys seem expert in this stuff. All right, now, how would you follow this up by a simplified open question? So you did a reflection. Now, how would you ask an open question about what this person said? Okay, we have when. An open question. Now, it has to be simple, a simple, concise, open question. Is smoking the only thing? Okay. Now, could I give you a little feedback, Wen? You all right with that? Yes. Okay. So when you say, is smoking the only thing, that kind of is a closed question, right? Because they're going to say yes or no. So how would you say that? How you don't want to. Let's just talk about this. You don't want to get into how does smoking, because we're talking about getting people to think about quitting, right? So you don't want to reinforce that smoking is. You could reflect it because that's just validating what they're feeling. But you don't want to ask a question where they get into how it calms them down. So, we let's say how, I don't know. Let's see what else we got. Have you ever used any now? Okay, let's take these because these are close questions. So, what other? This is for Sylvia. What other methods have you used that have helped you calm down? What are the other things that can calm you down when you worry or hear voices? Right? So that's a pretty direct, open question, right? Can you tell me, and Christy, you do what I always do, I'm polite, I ask people, can you? So if you cut out can you, and you just say, tell me other things that calm you down, right? Then that's just an open question, and because when you say can you, they could say, oh no, I can't. So it's a good open question. We just have to cut out right. They might say no. Okay, So you get this, though, that you want to be very simple so that people don't have to spend a lot of work trying to figure out what you mean, right? Like if they have some cognitive issues and we ask complicated questions, they're really not going to be able to answer those. If we do complicated reflections, they're going to not be able to track those. Okay, so this is great. Okay, so that's cognitive impairments, and that's simplifying your reflections and your open-ended questions. Now, the other thing you could do is when you give information or you're assessing kind of readiness, you could use visual aids, okay, which is sometimes much easier to understand and to stay engaged with than verbal. So let's look at some visual aids. You got visual or written aids, okay? You could have a checklist of potential goals. So and say, tell me what your goals are. They might be able to do it, and you could ask that, but they might have trouble. But if you say, here's some goals, which one is important to you, right? So you could have a checklist of potential goals that they could work from. We have this, Nancy really helped me. She put this in the handout. It's a values card sort, and it's a little card game that people can play, and it's modified for people with schizophrenia, and at the end, they come up with 4 or 5 things that are really important for them. And when you do a value card sort, and they come up with things, and you start trying to help people achieve, move towards their goals, then you could add, how does smoking impact on you getting a job? Or how does smoking impact on getting an apartment? Or how does smoking impact on buying the things you want to buy, right? So doing these identifying values, identifying goals is a very important part of helping build that discrepancy. But you can't just say what's important to you. You have to use some visual aids to do that. And so game, like a values card sort, is really helpful. And then you could use charts using pictures or feelings or words of feelings they can choose. So everyone has seen this chart. I had a knee replacement, and they were always asking me to do the chart, and sometimes I was like pretty unhappy. So this is a pain chart, but you could put in a readiness to, you could put at one end, not interested in quitting smoking. You could put in, somewhat interested, and then at the other end, interested, really interested. And you could use, I don't think you could use the same faces, but you could use imagery that illustrates quitting versus somewhat versus not. And I wanted to ask Jill, in the Learning About Healthy Living manual, there's a ladder, a readiness ladder. Am I correct?
It's in the assessment tool, which is in the manual. So, important confidence. I think we ask about just importance and confidence on that assessment tool.
Okay. So, but that's visual, right? Because it's like a ladder that you're moving up.
Yes.
Okay. So that's what we're saying. When we're working with people with cognitive impairments, visual aids really help keep them engaged. They easier for them to attend to, and easier for them sometimes to understand versus a verbal kind of conversation. And this is a little bit like what Jill is saying. This is a readiness ruler, and it's like it goes from 0 to 10. Now, it's color-coded in a funny way where green is 10, which is like you would say really ready. And so it's a little leading you into like saying it's better to be a 10 than a 0. but it really is color-coded, and people could look at it, and they could say, where are you on this in terms of cutting back or making a change in your smoking? And they might say, I'm red, I'm still red, I'm not interested, or I'm moving towards yellow, or, right? So they really have colored scales are really kind of very useful. And I'm sure there's a lot out there that you can Google, and there's stuff in the, as we mentioned in Learning About Healthy Living, that also is available to you. So have you guys, because you guys have worked in the field, have you used any visual aids in your work? And if you haven't, you could just write in no, but that's fine. Any visual aids? Okay, Sylvia's typing. A triangle. Sylvia, I believe your phone's open. Could you just mention what was on the triangle? Oh, you're typing. Okay. All right. While we're and there's one more thing. At the bottom of the triangle are stressors, okay? And at the top are things that are calming, I guess. Is that how you do it? Like, where are you on this triangle? Okay. Very good. That's great. You know, because lots of, when you work with people who use drugs, alcohol, tobacco products, stressors is a big issue that substance use and are connected to. So the more stress in your life, the more likely you are to engage in using drugs and alcohol and smoking. Okay, and the last one for cognitive impairments is the decisional balance. Now, we love the decisional balance, but for people with cognitive impairments, it could be very hard to keep in your thoughts the whole thing of, you know, reasons to keep things the same, you know, you know, the cons against the kind of bad things around keeping things the same, good things around making a change, things I worry about if I make a change, and then they have to keep that in balance. So when we do the decisional balance for somebody who has a cognitive impairment, we simplify it, it's more structured, and we have an engaging framework. There's one thing you can do, you can only look at one or two negative consequences and focus on those, and not try to get a whole list of negative consequences, so you simplify it that way. Or you could just discuss one side of the decisional balance, so it's the pros and cons of changing. If you're going to do that, it's a little better to do pros and cons of changing versus keeping things the same. And so this is what it could look like. It's colorful, and you could use different words than pros and cons. Take away the jargon. You could say, what would be the good things about making a change in your smoking? What would be some things you worry about if you made a change in your smoking? So you only have one side of the decisional balance. You simplify your decisional balance. So just to summarize, a lot of this, as you can see, is for people with cognitive impairments. It's simplifying, being clear, being concise, being colorful, using visual aids. Okay, those are all things you can include in the modification of motivational interviewing when you're working with people with cognitive impairments. I want to go on because it's 3:33. Maybe we could come back to this because we like to pick your guys' brains around this stuff. So we want to look at what other ideas do you think would help when using MI with cognitive impairments. But we're going to come back to that, okay? Because we want to go on to the next thing where you have, these kinds of symptoms like people have the symptoms like delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, and the issue when you do motivational interviewing, we're used to doing lots of reflections, and you have to be careful that if you're reflecting emotionally charged statements, people could actually get more symptomatic, right? So you have to be judicious in what you're reflecting and how you reflect. So the interesting thing about reflections when you're looking at the positive symptoms like hallucinations, etc., is that they function to both express your empathy, which is a big thing about reflections. You're saying, you're reflecting back in a way that says, this is how I understand what you meant by what you said. Do I have it right? And it's really looking at the world through the person's eyes, okay? What is it that they mean by what they say? So that's the empathy. But also when you do reflective listening with people who have kind of positive symptoms, you're creating a way of keeping the dialogue reality-based and logically organized. If you just simply reflect back, like repeating or rephrasing what they said, you could get caught in kind of their either their delusional content or their more around their hallucination, and it could get really disorganized, and you can end up being confused. Both of you could end up being confused in the conversation. So what works? Well, paraphrasing. Now, paraphrasing is interesting. There's four types of reflection. There's repeating back the exact words, basically. There's rephrasing, which is you're giving back what they said with slightly different words, but in those two, you're not adding any meaning. You're just giving back what they said. And it's better not to do that with people who are some of the content of their conversation is either delusional, or they're talking about hallucinating, or they're a little disorganized in their thought processes. So what you want to do is paraphrase. And paraphrasing is reflecting back the underlying meaning of what they said. Okay? So they say a sentence, and then you're going to reflect back what that underlying meaning is, so that you're keeping that underlying meaning is the reality base, okay? And you're going to do that a lot. So you're going to reflect what was implied but not directly stated, the underlying meaning. And here's an example. This comes directly from Martino and Moyer's article. So it says, tell me about what's led you to seek treatment in our program. An open question, right? And it's pretty clear and concise. And the person responds by saying, I'm not seeking treatment. Treatment is seeking me. So you could see if you repeated that or you just rephrased it, you're going to get caught up in this whole, thing around treatment seeking and not seeking, okay? So what you want to do is you're going to paraphrase. And the paraphrasing is the underlying meaning. It's not that you want to come here for treatment. Treatment is being forced on you. Now, you got to be careful you're not interpreting. You're not doing an interpretation. You're doing a paraphrase, okay? And then the person says, my parents are after me, partners in crime, that's what they are. And they recommended that you come here, and it seems like an injustice to you. You don't want to be here. Okay? You could see how this is underlining meaning, and it's a paraphrase, and it's not just rephrasing. And it keeps the conversation reality-based. Are there any questions about that? About this little vignette? All right, because we're going to try this stuff out. Well, the next thing is, and using metaphors is a type of paraphrasing, but it's a little deeper reflection. And you could use a metaphor if it's in what the statement is. You can't. It has to be in there somewhere, and you could use a metaphor, right? And it promotes empathic listening, and it works the way paraphrasing does, but it's even a little deeper than paraphrasing. So, here's an example. I don't have a problem with cigarettes. I stopped smoking. It's tucked under and out. I've seen the light. Now I've turned it over and off, never to witness such events again. Right? So you don't want to just do a simple reflection. And so you want to do a paraphrase, but you could use a metaphor. Okay? And the metaphor is it's tucked under and out. And so you say, you put your smoking to rest. And then they say, completely to rest, I ain't doing it no more. Now, this is fairly sophisticated motivational interviewing strategies. But do you guys have any questions on this, on using metaphors and paraphrasing? Any questions? Well, let's try this. The voices in my head tell me I have to keep smoking. How would you respond to this statement that would maintain reality base? The voices in my head tell me I have to keep smoking. Give it your best shot. Okay. Can we get one more shot? Okay, let's put these two up. And okay, we got three. Okay. So you are forced to smoke because the voices in your head tell you to. Okay. All right, now that is more of a rephrase, right? So that's a rephrase. You could do that, but you don't want to get into a lot of conversation about the voices in the head. Right? So something keeps telling you to keep smoking, okay? And doesn't mention the voices, but something is forcing you to smoke. And then this is a question. Does the voices tell you anything else? So this is feedback. You don't want to really get into talking a lot about the voices, right? Because then you get into a whole conversation about the voices. So here's one that seems a little closer to the reality. You feel forced to keep smoking. Oh, I forgot to broadcast this, sorry. Can everybody see this? So that's a good one. You feel forced to keep smoking. And then there's one with voice. Voices is sort of like your thoughts. So maybe you're feeling unsure about stopping. Okay, so this is stuff you might not want to say because you don't want to, because then they're going to get into a whole discussion about their thoughts and voices and, right? So you want to, what are they saying about their smoking, right? That's what you want to reflect. So I like you feel forced to keep smoking. And then it says, I have to keep smoking, but you might say, you have to keep smoking, right? So that would be kind of a little bit of a rephrase. But you feel forced to keep smoking is a paraphrase. And you could say, it's hard to imagine right now not smoking, right? But I like you feel forced, because that's kind of what they're saying. But you're not saying what's forcing them, but you feel forced to keep smoking. So you are saying you have to smoke, right? You just have to smoke. You're just not, right now you just don't feel ready to quit smoking. Is this making sense to everybody? And I think when saying I do have a problem differentiating rephrase from paraphrasing. Okay, that's really, and that's not uncommon. That's a really interesting issue to raise. So rephrasing is where you're using, you're just kind of changing the words around a little bit, or maybe you're using slightly different words. So, a rephrase would be, you have to keep smoking because the voices are making you. Right? It's just paraphrasing is the underlying meaning. So the underlying meaning of that is feeling forced to keep smoking. So that's the underlying meaning. It's what's implied in what was said. It's just not rephrasing the words. It's looking at what was implied in what they're saying. And what's implied is this sense of being forced to do something, being forced to smoke. Now, does that make a little? Okay. All right. All right. Let's go on to. So, could we take that down? Yeah. Okay. So, you guys are a terrific group and very active. I really appreciate it. Okay. Other things you could do when people are having kind of active positive symptoms. You could look at helping consumers look at what they want. So this is like you're trying to, this is going beyond reflection, but a listening change talk, right? How could you work with people who have active symptoms around changing their smoking, right? This is what your goal is, right? So you could look at this is what we already mentioned, and it's a little bit what we talked about for cognitive impairments, but you could help people identify their goals, what's important to you, what do you want to be in, how do you want things to be different. You could use the value card sort. And then when you're going through this, you could help try to help explore discrepancy. So, this is kind of what we mentioned already, but you want to develop the discrepancy between what they want in their lives and the impact smoking has on that. So that's one direction to go to. The other thing you want to do with people who are hallucinating or who have hallucinations or delusions or some thought disorder is you don't want to spend a lot of time reflecting disturbing life experiences. So if there's some negative affect, this is kind of the pros and cons of decisional balance. On the one hand, this, and on the other, that. You don't want to spend a lot of time around, I really don't like to take shots. I really don't like to do this, or this reminds me of this terrible thing that happened to me. You don't want to reflect that, because they can end up becoming, that when you reflect these disturbing life experiences, people can become more symptomatic versus less grounded in the discussion and the dialogue. So you want to, if they're ambivalent, you want to reflect the reasons, a little bit the reasons they don't want to change and the reasons they do want to change, and reflect that a little bit, but move quickly into reflecting the part of them that's talking about change, okay? So we don't want to, in motivational interviewing, explore ambivalence a lot. Here we don't want to spend a lot of time on the ambivalence. We want to quickly look at it, reflect it, and move on to the things that they say that have to do with change talk, and move to eliciting more change talk. You say, well, I hear that, you don't want to, you want to keep doing this for these reasons. On the other hand, you want to change, you like to change smoking because you're starting to have a little problems with your cough, and it's impacting on your finances. And then you could say, what other reasons might you consider change? So you're focusing on why they want to change, not any of the negatives. Okay, so that's when people have positive symptoms, hallucinations, solutions. So it's really using lots of paraphrasing, and paraphrasing a lot, and using that a lot, and not a lot of open-ended questions, but a lot of paraphrasing, because you're going to keep the person grounded in the reality base, okay? And you're going to keep the conversation structured. Okay, the last one we have is a diminished motivation, reduction in speech. This is sometimes called negative symptoms. And these are like the opposite, not the opposite, but you're going to do kind of the opposite of what you did in working with the positive symptoms, where you reflected a lot, and the person was talking, and you were trying to keep the conversation structured. Here, there's going to be right. Okay, so this is, I want to just go to Alyssa. Alyssa, how does this work with clients who have paranoia? I find that when I ask more open questions, the paranoia increases. So, could you give an example of what somebody, when you say paranoia, what would they say? We're going to do this quickly because we just want to get, why do you want to know this information? I don't want to talk about this. Okay, so what would be, let's just do this quickly. What would be a paraphrase? Instead of asking, you'll ask a question and say, why do you want to know this information? And what would be a paraphrase of that? What would be the underlying meaning? When's typing? You worry something might happen if you disclose this information. Yeah. You're worried something bad might happen if you disclose this information. Now, there's other ways to go about this. If somebody asks an open question, you could say, I see that you're worried that something bad might happen if you disclose this information. And that's not my intention. I'm not going to use this information unless you want to give it to me, and I'm only going to use it to help you sort out what you want for yourself. You know what I'm saying? So you could reflect it, and then you could explain a little bit and make it safe for that person, because you do have to try to build an interchange, an exchange of information or exchange of ideas that is safe for the consumer. You seem to have concerns about providing this information. Okay, these are good and you might have to say, and I'm sorry if you feel like I'm probing too much. That's not my intention. So you could add that. You could reflect and then add that piece. All right. We have to go. We only have a few minutes. So in the negative, it's really, this is a big challenge because people don't express emotions much. Their thinking slowed down. They don't process information very quickly. Sometimes they don't say much. They have thought blocking. Their motivation is impacted. And impacted in a way that they really, in general, have trouble getting involved. So they might have trouble getting involved in the conversation in general. So let's see what you could do. So it's interesting because in the positive symptoms, you're trying to structure the conversation, keep it reality-based, keep it organized, and the conversation's there. Here, you want to try to stimulate the discussion, right? Because people tend not to say a whole lot. And so you could use feedback that's straightforward, visual, and engaging. We'll talk about what that feedback looks like. And this is different than this is a real modification of motivation interviewing, because in motivation interviewing, they always say consumers should talk more than you do. This is, you may have to talk as much or more than the consumer, because the consumer is not going to say much. You need to give the consumer, the person, time to consider what you said and respond, right? And so there might be this period where nothing's being said, and you don't want to jump into it quickly and fill that space because they might just need that extra time to respond to what your reflection was. You're going to paraphrase frequently. You're going to paraphrase a lot. You're going to, in some ways, direct the conversation and you're putting a lot of energy into the conversation. You're going to do a lot of affirmations about the person just participating in what you're talking to them about. You're going to use a lot of visual aids, just like you did with cognitive impairments. And you're going to use prompts. And we've already talked about some of that, but list the possible goals, activities they might be, what would you be interested in, have a whole list. And versus saying, what would you like to do in the community, you have a whole list and pick what you might be interested in doing. You might have a list of the possible consequences that they see of using tobacco products. And I believe we have, this is the address, the web address you could use, and this is the smoking decisional balance scale form. Do we have that uploaded? I don't know. Do we have time?
I will do that right now.
Okay, I thought I sent that along. Maybe I didn't. But you could see, you're going to see that they could fill out, they can answer certain questions. So here it is. And so it says smoking cigarettes relieves tension. It goes from not at all to extremely. If you wanted to, you could do three: not at all, moderately, extremely. So they don't have a lot of things that they have to kind of consider. And so and then I'm embarrassed to have to smoke. Smoking helps me. And so they do this, and then I don't know what happened to this. There's some of these are connected with the pros and some of the cons of using. And so you'll have a score, a format. I think it may be on the slide that when they do this, you could see are there more things for deciding not to smoke than for keeping smoking. So we could take that down. So these are all tools. Maybe this is going to show up. Here's the scoring. So if you look at these 6 questions, 1, 3, and 5 have to do with the pros of smoking, and the pros of quitting, and 2, 4, and 6 have to do with the cons. So that's the scoring, and you'll have this web address you can go to if you want to use it. And then this is from a manual called Fresh Start, and these are like areas that people might want to do something in. They might want to work on. So this is another prompt versus just asking these open-ended questions. You give these, and it says, here's an area of your life. Are you satisfied, not satisfied, moderately, very satisfied? And what do you want to do in this area? What would you like to do? Okay, so these are just tools that you could use to stimulate discussion, because that's the issue with people with these kind of negative symptoms. And it's 4 o'clock. Let me go through. You could look at these. These are when to use motivational interviewing and when not to use it. Okay? If people are becoming more symptomatic as you're using it, stop, right? And, the wrap up, and we're not going to have time to, you can have fun with this, but we're not going to be able to do it. But I do want to say what's next. Work with your supervisor on this, try out the modifications, and bring what happened when you tried some of these to the next all-participant call, which is May 2nd, 3 to 4. And here's the handout. There's the slides. There's the value card sort and the decisional balance. So these things always whiz by for me. I hope you found them helpful. And if you